Welcome to this episode of Safe Home Podcast for struggling teens and their families finding their healing path. I am Beth Syverson, a mom of an 18-year-old son, Joey, who has been dealing with drug addiction, depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation for several years. I am walking beside him as he struggles with his recovery while I work on my own personal growth and healing. Make sure and follow Safe Home Podcast on any of your social media that you love to use. We also publish our episodes on YouTube, if that makes it easier for anybody. And we do have a Patreon account if anyone is interested in supporting us financially with a small donation. Patreon makes it very easy to donate once a month to podcasts and other artists that you love. So check us out, patreon.com/safehome. And we really appreciate your support. Now let's get to the episode. Today's episode is one that is near and dear to my heart since I am a lesbian married to a woman who is also a lesbian. That works out really well. And since our son Joey is also part of the LGBTQ plus alphabet soup. Our guest, Elena Joy Thurston, has created an organization called Pride and Joy Foundation, which is dedicated to reducing the rate of suicide and homelessness in the LGBTQ community. Oh my goodness, I can so support that. In addition, she is an inspirational speaker, inclusion trainer, a writer, and a publisher. Elena Joy will share about her own experience as a lesbian mom, and I'm excited to find out how we can all get involved in her Pride and Joy Foundation. Welcome to Safe Home, Elena Joy.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. This is going to be great.
I'm so glad you're here. I watched your awesome TED Talk. I loved it. And I'll link it in the notes. And it talks about your coming out story and how you've used mindfulness to navigate your coming out and your new life. Can you give us a quick version here so we can understand your personal stake in this whole LGBTQ issue?
Yeah. So I got married when I was 20. I was a member of the Mormon Church, and I immediately started to try to pop out babies.
That's what you do.
Right? By the time I was 32, I had 4 kids. And by the time I was 37, my youngest had gone off to kindergarten. And for the first time in almost 2 decades, I had 6 hours at a time to think for myself. Yeah, that can get dangerous. There was a lot of anxiety and depression going on, but I didn't realize that because those were kind of shameful. I really believed, along with most of the people that I went to church with, that if you prayed enough and if you read your scriptures enough and if you attended church and all your meetings and did your calling and did all the things you were supposed to do, then you would have the Spirit with you and you would not feel negative feelings like anxiety and depression. So the fact that I was feeling them was telling me like, I'm not good enough. And that was shameful. And I didn't want to explore that at all. So those feelings had started, they'd always been there. But I never knew how to take the blanket of shame off and actually examine them and question them and use some critical thinking skills. So by the time I was about 37, I just had this really persistent feeling that I didn't like my life. And I knew exactly how privileged and blessed my life was, right? We all enjoyed really good health. We had great schools. We lived in the neighborhood, right? Like that was the life we were living. And so to feel on a daily basis that I didn't like my life was just shameful to me. And so hence it took me many years to figure out what was going on. And eventually I got to a point where I was being very mindful of what my body was trying to tell me. I had tried to turn my body off for a long time because it's really considered like a source of temptation. It's the thing that's going to cause you to sin, right? And so you're taught to not follow your body.
Yeah, it's like a wild animal. You can't even control it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm in my late 30s and I finally start like trying to be in touch with my body. And, it started with like your last kid goes off to school. What do? You join a gym and you get your body back.
There you go.
It started with that. And it ended with me realizing my body had been trying to tell me for years that it's not that my husband was a bad guy or I'm a bad person. We're just not meant to be in an intimate relationship together. and I was completely and totally in love with my best friend. So those two realizations, they came, and it's not an option to be gay in the church. At least you can be celibate and gay. You can do that, but you can't act on any of those feelings and be a worthy member of the church. And so I started a repentance process, and part of that process was enrolling myself in a conversion therapy program, hoping that I could get rid of this temptation, this sin, right?
I thought those were only for teens. They have those for like regular grown-ups too. Wow.
They really do. Yeah. Wow. And it's only illegal in 20 states. Although I have to say, just in this past week, Canada and France enacted nationwide conversion therapy bans.
Wow. Woo-hoo.
It's amazing, because prior to them, there were only 3 countries, and the biggest one was Germany.
Wow.
So it's a really big deal. Yeah. It's kind of huge. And it actually, it caused all kinds of emotions in me, but we don't have to talk about that.
Oh gosh, another point.
So that happened, the whole conversion therapy. I went for 4 days a week, 2 hours a day for 6 months. And that was a little ridiculous. And 57% of participants end up suicidal. So that's where I was.
57%. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And a Williams Institute study just came out in 2020 that proved that 98% of participants will have lifetime suicidal ideation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that the case for you? Do you struggle with that?
I am still definitely struggling. Yeah. It is not a daily struggle anymore. I see my therapist regularly. I'm on meds regularly. I do all of these very intentional self-awareness exercises, as well as the people closest to, like, suicide is not an ugly word in my home. Like, we have to talk about it. Like, my kids need to know that where I was and where I will probably be for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And the more I talk about it, doing interviews like this and such, the more I feel like I'm integrating that part of me and not trying to shut it down. And that way I can actually deal with it. That way I can be aware and say, okay, this is a morning where I'm really struggling to stay here. Here's my plan, my implementation plan, right? Here are the people I contact. Here are the self-care things I do. I'm going to close those meetings that I had planned on my calendar, because this is more important, right? And if I don't address it so blatantly, I'm not able to do that. So
you keep it out in the open. If you don't ever talk about it, then it's easy to spiral down, right?
Exactly.
Especially if no one in your family, or like if your supporters don't know that you're kind of going that direction, then nobody can help you. And then it could be too late. Wow, that's really important. And I think it's great that you're talking about it here, because I think one of the main purposes of this podcast is to reduce stigma in lots of things. So suicidal ideation, my son struggles with that every day. And it is gnarly. And if we don't talk about it, it's not like it's going to go away, right?
Exactly. It just gets bigger, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I learned my lesson. I don't want to learn it again, that anything I cover with a blanket of shame in my brain, it will bite me in the butt.
Yeah. It's just not a good thing. The shame is not helpful, for just about anything. All right. Okay. So you got out of conversion therapy. That must have been really tough.
Yeah, well, it was interesting, because what was happening was the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And we were seeing all these headlines that 75% of American women have been assaulted at some time in their lives. And my conversion therapist, I put that in air quotes, his premise was something happened to you when you were a child, a trauma that caused you to feel unsafe around men. And that's why you think you're attracted to women. So if we can heal that trauma, then you won't be attracted to women anymore. So I had been working for 6 months trying to heal, an assault that had happened when I was 15. And I was convinced, and he was convinced, that was the reason I thought I was attracted to women. But I spent 6 months reliving that experience, and then saw that headline, 75%. 75% of American women are not attracted to other women.
No.
Those two things don't add up.
It's not a consequence of when
Right?
it's not the
It's
consequence of
correlated,
another.
but it's not a
Yeah.
consequence. Yeah.
No. Wow. So that must have really triggered a lot of feelings in you watching that on
Oh my
TV. And that was so
gosh.
terrible for so many women. Oh my gosh.
So many. And our stories were like ridiculously similar. So that was crazy hard, but also watching the men in my life, like my ex-husband or my then husband, and my two oldest are boys as well. And they were teens at the time. And so watching them respond to what she was saying was one of the hardest experiences of my life.
Were they saying like she asked for it or she was drunk?
She's lying. It was
she's lying.
It was just she's lying. She's just trying to take him down. She has an agenda. Like it was that kind of stuff, and that really opened my eyes to realizing, I mean, so many different gender issues and survivor issues, and I think that's when my bubble burst. You know, not only was the conversion therapy a scam, but this system, this heteropatriarchal system that is in place that I've been a part of, like,
Sure.
it really opened my eyes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you're swimming in it from birth, right? We don't even realize it until something happens where you go, oh crap, this sucks. This is terrible. We need to fix this for each of us individually and just for the whole culture to survive.
Because it's not serving anyone.
No,
not anyone.
Not the men either, right?
It's not.
Oh, there's so much work to do. Okay, so I assume you eventually got divorced because you called him your ex-husband. So you got divorced. That probably was not so fun.
Not so great. No.
not usually a good time, but especially with all those shame layers and constrictions of your religion. So, and you had your 4 kids. How did your kids manage that? And
they're doing well. There's definitely still issues, especially considering the fact that dad is still very Mormon and mom is obviously very not. So there's definite issues there. But honestly, I was worried I wouldn't even get custody of my kids. Like I had been taught for so long that like this is wickedness. No, like you can't be happy, you can't be successful. Like I honestly, when I filed for divorce, I was like 80% sure I wouldn't get any custody of my kids.
Wow.
Just because, not because I was a drug addict or an alcoholic or like an abuser of any kind. It was just because of my sexuality.
You know, it's really strange because right when you were saying that, I realized, because looking back, I got divorced when my son was 4, or I left him when he was 4, and it took us a long time to get divorced because he was an ass. But I should have fought harder for him, but I think it was because I was a lesbian and I'm in Orange County, and I was like, nobody is gonna. I wasn't afraid I was going to lose him completely. But I was like, no judge is going to ever give him to me, a man or a lesbian. Are you kidding? So I just realized that when you were just saying that, that's terrible. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Internalized homophobia rearing its ugly head.
Yeah. And like you, I didn't come out. I didn't know. It wasn't even on my radar till after I got divorced. I'm like, oh, that's why I've always had trouble with men. Oh my gosh. And so, oh my goodness, it's crazy. Oh goodness. And I also had all those shame layers from my religion growing up, and, just generations of shame just piled on. So it's tough. So how did you go from, being so wounded and, I don't know, kind of fragile and just like trying to make it on your own. And then now you have a foundation to help LGBTQ people. I mean, that's a big jump.
Amen, sister. It really is. And I look back and I'm like, I don't even know how this happened, but it did. I had spent, it took us a really long time to get divorced as well. And during the divorce, I was trying to get a job. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for almost 20 years. Like I had run a photography business for 10 years. So I had done like entrepreneurship, but no one really cares about that on your resume. And 80% of my clients were Mormon. And so when I came out within a month, I lost all of my clients.
Oh, sure. Yep.
So that wasn't going to pay any bills. So I was applying. I applied for 166 jobs and I got one interview. Yeah.
Whoa.
So then it felt like my body was telling me, you got to open your own business. You got to just be in charge, because that way you can be in charge of your own schedule. You can, like, if the kids need you, right? Like all of that. And so I met with a business coach and I was like, this is my story. I don't know what to do. And she was like, oh, this is valuable.
Okay.
Like, you are not the only woman that is going through this. Like, you can turn this into a business, absolutely, for sure. But you have to get some validity first. So it's either got to be write and publish a book or get a TED Talk. And I was like, oh, I can do a TED Talk. The book felt intense, but I could do a TED Talk. And so I worked with a speaking coach for 4 months and applied, got the TED Talk. It went live in November of 2019. I started setting up all these speaking engagements all over the country. So excited. And then March of 2020 hit and it all went away. And I was face down on the couch as I started getting all these messages from queer college students that I was supposed to go and talk to. And they were saying, I had just come out. I had waited till I graduated from high school to come out. And now I've just been sent home with no notice. The world is shut down. I feel so alone. And I was like, oh, I know that feeling. And I needed to, I could either sit on that couch and rot, or I could help them. And so I started the foundation.
Okay. Wow. Well, and there's so much you probably didn't know it then. You probably had no idea how long this thing would last, but the COVID thing, I mean, but have you been able to do speaking on Zoom? Were you able to pivot and do some things on Zoom?
Yeah, eventually everything did pivot to Zoom. And yeah, I've been doing regular speaking engagements, which is fabulous. I think what happened in there was my realization as these kids reached out to me. I had been really focused on people like me, right? That's your ideal client avatar, right? Like who you were 5 years ago. That's who I had really been marketing to. And the colleges just kind of happened. And so then when I heard from them, and they were feeling all the same things I was feeling, like I just came out and now all the gay bars are shut down.
Yeah,
like
that sucks.
What the hell? So then it was realizing they were at such risk for suicide. Like as our suicide rate skyrocketed during the pandemic that first year, I realized I know that pit. I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to feel like your own head is not a safe place to be. And how do you escape yourself? And when the pain is so much that it's not that you're really wanting to end your life, you're just wanting to stop the pain.
Yeah.
Like I knew all of that, and I wasn't willing to let other people's babies go through that.
Right.
So then it was time, like, we got to fix this.
Yeah. And you had the gift of wisdom that came from maturity. You know, you had 20 years or whatever on these college kids, but you had recently experienced similar things. So it's you were in an interesting juncture where you could be of service even while you're still dealing with your own, the impact of you coming out and growing into who you are. That's wonderful. So is that your primary clients or your focus right now is the college age kids?
Oh, honey, teenagers? We got so much going on.
Tell me.
So we have the suicide awareness and prevention workshops that we do for LGBTQ college centers. We have grants that fund those. And so we get to do those for free, which is awesome.
Great.
And because of COVID, we can do them virtually, which is also awesome. So we can keep them very low cost, and which means we're able to do more of them. The grant can go farther. And we target rural universities. So not your majors, because they usually have enough resources for their LGBT center, right? And their mental health support and all of that. No, we go to like Southeastern Missouri.
Right. Yeah.
Like
go
small schools whose kids, like, not only are we providing a resource that they might not have gotten otherwise, but also many of those kids at those rural schools, they've never really interacted with professional LGBTQ people. Like they don't know how to like show up to interviews as themselves or find companies that are inclusive, right? So we try to like drop that in there as well, or even do a whole separate workshop just on being queer and having a great career, right? So it's really a great two-pronged thing. We're able to go in and talk about what is suicide really? Let's remove the stigma. What are the resources besides calling 911, right? That are available in your area? What are some questions you can ask your roommate if you're concerned about them, right? Like little things like that. But then also like, I hate the term "it gets better," but there is something about seeing someone 20 years out from you who's living a really happy, successful, fulfilled life.
Yeah. And some of those kids from small towns probably have never seen that.
Right.
I mean, I grew up like, that's why it was never on my radar. I didn't grow up with, I didn't know gay people, maybe Billie Jean King, but she was derided, you know, in my culture. It was like, God, she's so butch. Why isn't she just a man? You know,
right.
That kind of thing. So, yeah, I didn't see it. And back then, well, I guess Ellen came out when I was probably in late high school.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest
That was the
thing.
big event.
Like, what? I didn't even know what to do with that. But yeah, if you're in a small town or kind of a conservative area, they won't see that. So how do you get them to come to your workshop? Do you say, "All the queer people come over here"? You know, how do they come? What do you?
We usually leave it up to the school to promote it.
Okay.
But it really is like, we compare it to like a CPR workshop. Like you go for an afternoon. Does that mean you're a heart surgeon? No. But does it mean you have the skills to intervene in a crisis? Yes. Yeah. And so it's considered like, come for an hour and a half, learn some skills. And then if your roommate or your friends, or maybe yourself is in crisis, you're going to have some tools and resources.
Oh, you go like, oh, help your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good.
We use, suicide hotlines are a great line of defense, but they should be the last, not the first. Like we in the community should be looking out for each other.
Yeah. Actual people are in the, that you can go talk to are probably more valuable that actually already know you. Wow. So you said suicide rates are way worse for LGBTQ since COVID started in 2020. What else, self-harm? Are there other statistics or general, maybe just from being out with lots of people? How are we doing?
Right. Self-harm is definitely skyrocketing. And we're actually doing a parent workshop. That's one of our sections that we have. We have Pride and Joy Parents, which we try to meet quarterly, and we bring in an expert to help us answer all those questions. And so in November, it was our suicide awareness one, very similar to what we do at the college campuses. But coming up in February is going to be all about self-harm. We actually have a lesbian psychologist who works in a high school. She'll be coming, and parents will be able to ask all the questions about, how do I spot self-harm? What is it really? What are the common ways? How do I talk about it? How do I deal with it? How do I find a therapist? Right? Like all the things. So self-harm is definitely rising. And I personally, I feel like it has a lot to do with just not feeling in control of their own body. The fact is we're living in a global pandemic, and we're trying to make all the right choices, but it never feels like we're making the right choices. And so when we have a child who's growing and figuring out their body, and they're dealing with a constant threat to their body, it's going to manifest somehow. And oftentimes it's self-harm. But one cool thing that has come out of the pandemic that I think has been really helpful, like parallel things. One is that there's been a lot of research just in the last 3 years, maybe, about the correlation between being LGBTQ and neurodiversity. And then the other part of that prong is that we're all sitting around at home staring at our social media, and other people are realizing like, oh, I didn't realize autism manifested like this, or I didn't realize ADD manifested like this. And so you're having all these people actually talking about how they experience life and how they take in information and what manifests for them. And so what has been incredible, there's an article about this on our blog, is that I think the overlap now is like 40% of neurodiverse people are also LGBTQ.
Wow. That's a big
Yeah.
chunk. Now, neurodiverse, some people might not know what all that encompasses.
Yes.
I used to think it was just autism, but it's not just autism.
No, yeah, it's autism spectrum disorder as well as ADD, ADHD, sensory issues are included in there. So yeah, it's a pretty wide range, and I really love the term neurodiverse because it really allows it to me. It's like LGBTQ, right? It allows us to find our place within it, but we're not locked into a box.
We're just different, right? Diverse, just different. Everybody's different anyway.
Truth.
Oh my goodness. So once a quarter you specifically talk with parents.
Yeah.
What from being with the teens and the young adults, what are they needing from their parents? What are they not getting?
Thank you for asking this question because almost no one does. And I really appreciate that. So this has just come to be very clear for me in the last 3 or 4 months. There are parents who don't even want to hear about it, and their kids know, so their kids are not out to them. There are parents, we'll say on the other end of the spectrum is parents like me. When my 13-year-old daughter came out, like I had a lot of resources at my fingertips because I'm also out, right? And so the support was very easy in this home. Okay, but in the middle is where like 90% of parents lie. And what I'm realizing is their kids are coming out to them. The parents are saying, I love you no matter what. And then the conversation ends.
Yeah.
And the kids need so much more than that. LGBTQ children are one of the only marginalized populations, born to parents not of the same marginalized population. Right? When you have a Black child born to Black parents, that child is growing up with the stories, the culture, the tips, the tricks, like all the things, right? When you have an LGBTQ child, or the other population is the deaf population, born to parents not of the same marginalized population, their culture is not innate in their home. You know, they hear the words, I love you no matter what. Yeah. But what they're not seeing is, I'm like you.
Right. They're feeling like an outsider in their own family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Wow. So parents should educate themselves, go to your workshops, for instance, and open up the conversation with their kids after they come out. Not just say, okay, I love you no matter what. And then we're not talking about it.
The first thing I suggest is a couple of books. One of them is called Queer Agenda. It is by Chess Needham. You can find it anywhere. It is like the most amazing book because not only are the illustrations like works of art, but also it's like part history book and part like current day language and culture book.
Oh, nice.
And so you get to like anyone who reads that book, whether you're queer or an ally, you learn history that you never knew before. I didn't know how we got to the point where like the US government didn't want to employ homosexuals. Wow. But through that book, you can see the logic and how it got there. So that opens up a whole new world. And I actually keep that book like literally on my coffee table because every kid that comes into my home wants to read it. Every single one. Okay. Yeah, it's so cool. And then there's another book called The 50 Gay States. And it goes through literally every single state and talks about like the prominent queer people, the places, the historical places, like that one reads like a textbook, like it's massive. But literally just by having those 2 books and doing a cursory overview of them, your kid feels like you're on their side.
Okay.
And that you're now part of the community as an ally. That needs to happen. And it doesn't happen if all you say is, I love you no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what if just by chance some parents said, I love you no matter what, but you know what we think about that?
Yeah.
You know, we love the, what is it? Love the sinner, hate
love
the sin.
Hate the sin.
How does that work for you? God, that is like a knife cutting into your heart. It's horrible.
It really is.
Yeah. It bothers me so much because I'm like, I am not sinning. It is not a sin. And some people in my life have compared it to, well, Jesus loved the robber and the prostitute and the blah, blah. I don't think prostitution's a sin either, but Jesus loved the sinners anyway. Like, but there's no anyway. There's no
anyway. No.
It's so painful.
It really is. And it's so sad because so many parents do say those words, and then 5-10 years later, they're a strong ally, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, your kid will always remember those words.
Yeah.
I remember it from all of my in-laws. I mean, I was the first one married into that family. So I was with that family for 2 decades.
Yeah, it's your family.
They were my family every Sunday night, right? Like, they were there for all my babies being born, the whole thing. And then to hear them say, "We love you, Elena, no matter what. We just don't condone your choices."
Yes. Oh, that sounds so familiar. Yeah. What did you do with that?
That sat in my heart for a long time. And honestly, I don't know that I can say that I'm over that. It would go a long way if anyone in that family could say, "I know we said this to you, we communicated this to you, and now we realize that that was not a good choice of words."
Well, in the word choice, we don't condone your choice, as if being gay is a choice in the first place.
That's right.
Oh, I guess in the church, they were saying, it is a choice for you to act on it or be celibate the rest of your life. So I guess in their view, it was a choice, but I don't think it's a choice. Sometimes I see this coming up about gender all over the place. I know we're talking about gayness right now, but it's kind of, you work with LGBTs and
gender is a big issue.
And I see parents all the time on these parent groups saying, "Oh, my kid just decided to be trans or just decided to be gender nonconforming, and they just decided, and oh my gosh, is this just a phase? What is going on with all these kids who are coming out?
Is it a trend? They're just trying to be like a cool kid."
And I think it's awesome because the kids hopefully are more open and more flexible, more fluid with their gender, which is awesome because I don't think it's just two genders. And the parents just, I sometimes ask them, "Well, when did you realize that you were whatever gender you are? How old were you?" I think you were like 0 or 3 maybe when you realized, "Oh, I'm a girl or I'm a boy." It's not, some people I've seen were saying, "She's 13, that's way too young to know what gender you are." I'm like, no, it's not.
It's really not.
No, it is not.
No, Gen Z is going to change the world.
Yeah.
So one of the most amazing statistics that I found is that if you break it up by generation, boomers identify as LGBTQ at maybe 5%. And then you've got Gen X, my generation, and we are identifying as LGBTQ, maybe 8 to 10%, depending on which study you look at, right? And then you've got millennials who are identifying as LGBTQ right around 10 to 15%, depending on which study, right? And then you've got Gen Z, who are currently 14 to 25, right about in there. And if you give them the same question that you gave all the other generations, they're going to respond as LGBTQ identifying right around 15 to 20%. But if you change the question, which happened by a major data company, they asked, "Do you identify as strictly heterosexual?" And 33% responded no.
Wow.
1 in 3.
So these people that are noticing these quote unquote trends in schools, well, that's because a third of us are queer.
That's right.
Right. And queer, I know some people kind of bristle at that word. I think you use the word queer, right?
I do.
It just kind of covers everything, right?
It does.
It's just like all the divergent people, right?
When I ask about, or when I'm asked in like corporate trainings, like, what about this word queer? What I often say is, I'm 42. If I'm speaking to an audience that's my age or older, I am not going to use that word because their experiences with that word, like, I can't even begin to imagine, right? If I'm speaking to an audience my age or younger, I am going to use that word because they have reclaimed it and they feel like it is a beautiful umbrella that encompasses the entire community in a protective way and allows them to be fluid within that umbrella, right?
Right. Yeah,
So I
and
do use it.
you get rid of those alphabet soups, QIA,
Mhm.
plus, 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 and I don't know what all those letters are anymore, but if you just allow it to be queer and just people are on a gender and a sexual identity spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Like they're free to go and move along that spectrum, right? No one's
Mhm.
stuck where they are either. People grow and maybe realize, oh, I want to move a little bit more this direction, or maybe I feel more fluid in my gender over here.
Mhm.
So I think it's going in a beautiful direction with the kids that I'm seeing
I do
showing up.
too.
Now, I was
Yeah.
when my son was in school, I was like, okay, Joey's generation is going to fix all this. And when I figured out I was gay when he was 5, and then I got married, or not, we didn't get married yet because we couldn't, but till 2013. But when we got together, I thought, okay, Joey's going to be okay with having gay moms because his generation is fine. They're like, whatever, who cares? That was not true in my son's case. He went to school in Huntington Beach, which is really, really white supremacist and conservative. And
Oh, you are not lying. That area is a little nutty.
it is terrible. We live in a super blue state. I live it up in LA, which is super duper blue, but Huntington Beach and that area is so not. And he got teased relentlessly for having gay parents. And I feel terrible about that. And I'm not going to not be gay because of it, but I feel terrible and I didn't realize it.
Yeah,
Tell
they
me
don't
because
tell
he was
you. They don't
ashamed.
tell you. They know not to tell you.
Ugh.
No.
So and now maybe this newer generation that's even younger than him, or perhaps it'll take a while to get this into Huntington Beach.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. And first of all, where we live is literally 80% Mormon. We are in Arizona, but we are in a very concentrated area. So literally our congressional district supplied the most people to the January 6th event out of the entire country. That's where we live.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So and my kids go to school with their kids. My 17 and 19-year-old definitely experienced, like, I don't think I want to tell people even that my parents are divorced, let alone that my mom is gay, right? However, my 13-year-old and my 11-year-old, oh, they could give a rip. They're telling the world. And when their teachers have comments for them, which they do, like, my girls will shoot it right back at them. Like, they have no problem, and they will get in your face if you think that there's a problem with them having lesbian moms. So
wow.
it's fascinating, just that
That's
difference.
just a couple of years. What do you attribute that difference to? Is it something shifted in the culture?
Yes, I do think it shifted in the culture. I do think both of my girls have kids in their classes that identify as non-binary or trans. And so they are looking at it as their classmates. And my girls are very protective of their classmates. And so they're not going to let anyone write on them either, kind of thing. Whereas I'm sure my boys have classmates that are non-binary or trans, but they are not very visible to my boys. And so I don't think that they feel like that personal connection to their peers in that way.
Well, I hope that maybe in another generation or two, they'll be like, what? People used to, treat people badly because they were gender nonconforming or whatever it is.
Right? People used to think there were only two genders.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How stupid were they? How narrow-minded they were. Yeah. I feel like we're at a pivot point. And I think COVID kind of, even though it's made practically everything worse, I think it's forcing us to really look at some stuff. And maybe.
Okay. Seriously, Beth, can you imagine if you had been quarantined with your ex-husband? Like, if it were me, like, one of us would not be alive today. Like, that would not have gone well. So I really do feel like the pandemic has really forced people to realize, like, one, life is short. And two, I am stuck with this person 24 hours a day. And I'm not distracted by 100 million other things. This is really making me question how I feel about myself and how I feel about them.
Yeah, it's really peeled away a bunch of layers and forced us to really look at ourselves in so many different ways. Wow. Well, if we all can just get through this somehow,
Yeah.
and gosh, we've lost so many people that we're not able to get through it. They succumb to this horrible disease, but the ones that can get through it, if we can learn from it, I think that would be something,
It
you know,
could be
to
an amazing
say,
pivot point for our
yeah,
world. It
they could
really
look
could.
back and go, that pandemic really made these shifts. Well,
Hmm.
maybe it will help. Although it sounds like so far it's been detrimental. But I think if we keep pushing on and keep just living our truth, and people like you, Elena Joy, that are out there talking about your truth and your authentic self, I think the more people that do that, the more people will go, oh, I don't have to live a lie. I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. I can just be who I am. And there are people in the world that will accept me. What can we all do to support your wonderful organization that is helping LGBTQ people? What
Mm.
can we do to help you?
You know what would be the most helpful, honestly? A lot of our funding, we do solicit for donations once in a while. Like if you come to a Pride and Joy Parents Workshop, we ask you to donate something, literally as little as $1. The average donation is like $12. We don't want to force our own community to support the resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like financially, that's hard. And so a huge part of our program is that we go into organizations like corporations or town governments or local governments, and we teach what inclusion actually is. We
Mm-hmm.
teach what words to use and what words not to use. We teach how to respond when someone comes out to you and why you shouldn't respond in certain ways, right? Like really like wonderful basic inclusion concepts,
Mm-hmm.
and the corporations and the governments, they pay for those, and we can take
Yes.
that money and put it towards our own community, right? So if you have an employer, a manager, someone who would appreciate that kind of information, because it really does affect the bottom line. Like it's not a hard sell,
Mm-hmm.
because diverse and inclusive companies are 2.3 times more profitable, according to Harvard Business.
Oh,
So it's
nice.
not a hard sell necessarily. Once they realize that we can do it in a very non-judgmental way, that we're not trying to force everyone into some gay agenda, right?
Right.
Like once they realize it's a conversation just like this,
Yeah.
then it's not a hard sell. But getting in the door is the hard part. So anyone who can open that door for us, it goes a huge long way.
Okay, everybody, think about your employer, your organizations that you know. That's a great idea because, yeah, DEI, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
DEI,
yeah,
DEI is huge right now,
it
and
really is.
companies are willing to do it because they need to. They need to.
Yeah, they do.
I love you mentioned gay agenda. I love that people think there's a gay agenda. Sometimes when my wife and I are like doing laundry or like, schlepping our kid to baseball or whatever, we're like, yeah, I guess this is the gay agenda. I don't know. We have no master plan of this whole thing. It's like, what do you think we're going to do to you? I don't know. I've always thought that was kind of funny.
Okay, have you ever experienced like a straight friend being like, well, I'm kind of worried you're gonna hit on me now that you're out. And I want to be like, honey, you are not my type. Just
That is
because I'm a
funny.
lesbian doesn't mean like, yeah, I'm going around looking at all the
After all the girls,
women and like, come on.
it does shift though. I think that is funny too, but it does shift your relationships with your
Your
girlfriends.
girlfriends, it
It's
really
strange because
does.
it used to be like your girlfriends, you all had husbands or boyfriends, and
Right. So you
now,
had that common language.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does kind of change some dynamics there. I've noticed that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to talk about your publishing company?
Oh, I'd love to.
I'm really excited
Yeah.
about that project.
So we started Pride and Joy Publishing last year, and we published our first book, which is a compilation of tips and tricks from different queer business leaders. Everyone from the self-help space to corporate to freelancers, like everyone, I'm in there, everyone's in there. And it is within a week of coming out, it hit #1 on 4 different lists, including women's studies, which was awesome,
Wow.
and LGBT studies. And we are actually petitioning the Library of Congress to create a category called non-binary studies.
Nice.
Yeah, so hoping to get that through. But so that was like a really beautiful accomplishment. But what was truly amazing with it was probably about half of the authors in the book had never been published before. And they had it like on a huge bucket list to be a published author. And to work with them was truly incredible. It changed their lives putting together this
Wow.
book, right? Which wasn't the hardest thing I've ever done. So once it was all done and I realized how the impact that it made, not just on the audience, but on the authors themselves,
Mm.
that's when it was like, oh, we're doing this more.
Yeah.
Like we are giving LGBTQ authors a voice and we're going to
Nice.
amplify it. And yeah, it's pretty fun.
Have any of those initial authors in that compilation project, have they gone on to work on their own
Oh yeah,
solo
probably
project?
4 of them are working on their own, and we're just waiting for the manuscript. We can't wait to publish it for them.
Oh my gosh. So if somebody has a story, is it mainly memoirs and that kind of thing that you're working with, or?
Right. So it's called prescriptive nonfiction. So that's memoirs or self-help or empowerment books. The goal is to empower the community
Okay.
and to give voice to queer.
So who has a book like that inside you? Call Elena
Yeah.
Joy. What's your publishing company called? Is it just part
Pride and
of
Joy
Pride and Joy
Publishing.
Publishing?
Yep.
So Pride and Joy Foundation, Pride and Joy Publishing. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about
Well,
your
we're
organization?
thank you. I appreciate that because we're so excited. We are starting a program last fall. Let me back up. Last fall, we wanted to help these LGBTQ business owners as well. Because what often happens is that LGBTQ people can't find an inclusive workplace. They can't find a place where they can be authentic. And so they often, at a higher rate than straight people, go off and strike it off on their own and develop their own
Oh,
companies.
yeah.
So, because that's where they can truly be themselves, right? And so we wanted to find a way to help these LGBTQ business owners. And it started with public speaking. So we did a 6-week course called Keynote Queers. And I taught it along with my TEDx speaking coach, and it was fabulous. And multiple people ended up with talks that I for sure could be on the TED stage if they wanted to. It was incredible. And then we decided to switch the focus for spring for writers. So we're starting a program called Outright Authors.
Mm.
And it is a 6-week writing intensive focused on memoir or other nonfiction. And we are working with the most amazing late in life lesbian who's also a book coach who graduated from Yale Law. Like, she's amazing. And she's also like, she's a generation older than me. And so every time I get to talk to her, man, who knew I needed a lesbian mom? But I really did.
There's something about that, isn't it?
There's something about that. So I'm so honored to be able to work with her, and we'll be launching that this spring for sure.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That sounds really great. There's so many people that have a story in them, but they just
Yes.
have no idea where to even begin.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, oh my gosh, come be with us, fellow queer people, and let your hair down and let us help you build the foundation, write the outline so that for the rest of 2022, if you actually want to write this book, it's going to be so much easier for you.
Wow. Well, I'm sure there are lots of people that are going to grab onto that. That's an awesome opportunity. Well, you're doing so many amazing things. Did you know you had all this in you
No,
when you're, taking care of the house and your 4 kids and you're,
right? And I was a Cub Scout leader for like a million years. Like,
yeah.
I didn't realize that. I mean, that job was like 20 to 30 hours a week for 11 years. And so now I'm realizing, like, wow, I did a lot to build up a Cub Scout program.
Yeah.
What did I do to build like my own business, my own career, my own stuff? Yeah.
But you use those same skills, I'm sure.
Yeah. A
The skills
lot of
that
the
you
same
learned,
skill.
the networking and the
For
how to get people
sure.
to volunteer for stuff and
Yep.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. Going back to when you said you were having trouble finding a job, you put in 160 applications. It's that patriarchy that says women working at home is not,
Yeah.
it doesn't count.
That's right.
It doesn't go on your resume.
Even though I
Whatever.
had so many skills.
Yeah. And all
Yeah.
that experience. You had basically a job, well, 2 jobs, parenting and keeping the house going, and Cub Scouts sounds like a huge part-time job, but it didn't count. It didn't click the right boxes.
No, it didn't
So,
qualify me to
yeah.
actually earn an income.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you figured out to do it on your own because you're doing awesome work. I'm really proud of you. I'm just excited to know you. And
you.
I'm sure our paths will cross again. I really want to do a TED Talk. So I've got to talk to you about that.
Oh, we got that. We can do that.
Okay. That's one of my goals, one of my dreams. Oh, well, it's been wonderful getting to know you and hearing all about your wonderful things. I hope lots of people look you up, and I wish you all the best. Thank you all for listening. It's been great having you. Thank you for your support of Safe Home Podcast. And Elena Joy and I want you to stay safe.